Chapter 17. The sun came out of the desert like a lion, and beat at all the doors of Israel. From every Jewish home the savage morning prayer rose up to the stiff-necked God of the Hebrews. We hymn you and glorify you, our God, and God of our fathers, almighty and terrible. You are our help and support. Glory to you, immortal glory to you, defender of Abraham. Who can vie with you in strength, O King, with you who slay, resurrect, and bring deliverance? Glory to you, deliverer of Israel. Destroy and crush and scatter our enemies, but quickly, while we are still alive. Sunrise found Jesus and John the Baptist sitting above the Jordan in the hollow of a precipitous rock. All night long the two of them had held the world in their hands, deliberating what to do with it. Sometimes one took it, sometimes the other. The one's face was severe and decisive. His arms went up and down, as though he were actually holding an axe and striking. The other's face was tame and irresolute, his eyes full of compassion. "Isn't love enough?" he asked. "No," answered the Baptist angrily. "The tree is rotten. God called to me and gave me an axe, which I then placed at the roots of the tree. I did my duty. Now you do yours. Take the axe and strike." "If I were fire, I would burn. If I were a woodcutter, I would strike. But I am a heart, and I love." "I am a heart also. That's why I cannot endure injustice, shamelessness, or infamy. How can you love the unjust, the infamous, and the shameless? Strike. One of man's greatest obligations is anger." "Anger?" said Jesus, his heart objecting. "Aren't we all brothers?" "Brothers," the Baptist replied sarcastically. "Do you think love is the way of God? Love? Look here." He stretched forth his bony, hairy hand and pointed to the Dead Sea, which stank like a rotting carcass. "Have you ever bent over to see the two whores, Sodom and Gomorrah, at her bottom?" God became angry, hurled fire, stamped on the earth. Dry land turned to sea and swallowed up Sodom and Gomorrah. That is God's way. Follow it. What do the prophecies say? On the day of the Lord, blood will flow from wood. The stones of the houses will come to life, will rise up and kill the house owners. The day of the Lord has set out and is coming. I was the first to discern it. I uttered a cry, took God's axe, placed it at the root of the world. I called for you to come. You came, and now I shall depart. He grasped Jesus' hands as though he were placing a heavy axe in them. Jesus drew back, frightened. "Be patient a little longer, I beg of you," he said. "Don't hurry. I shall go speak to God in the desert. There his voice can be heard more clearly. So can the voice of temptation. Take care. Satan is lying in wait for you, his army all in order. He knows very well that you mean life or death for him. He shall fall upon you with all his wildness and all his sweetness. Take care. The desert is full of sweet voices and death." Sweet voices in death cannot deceive me, friend. Trust in me. I do. Alas, if I didn't. Go talk with Satan, talk with God too, and decide. If you are the one I have been awaiting, God has already made the decision, and you cannot escape. If you are not, what do I care if you perish? Go ahead, and we'll see. But quickly, I don't want to leave the world all alone. The wild dove that beat its wings above me while I was being baptized, what did it say? It was not a wild dove. The day will come when you shall hear the words it pronounced. But until then, they will hang over you like swords. Jesus rose and held out his hand. Beloved forerunner, he said, his voice shaking. Farewell, perhaps forever. The Baptist pressed his lips to Jesus' lips and held them there. His mouth was a live coal, and Jesus' lips were scorched. It is to you I finally render my soul, he said, tightly squeezing Jesus' tender hand. If you are the one I've been waiting for, hear my last instructions, for I think I shall never see you again on this earth. Never again. I'm listening, Jesus whispered, shuddering. What instructions? Change your expression, strengthen your arms, make firm your heart. Your life is a heavy one. I see blood and thorns on your brow. Endure, my brother and superior. Courage. 2 roads open up in front of you. The road of man, which is level, and the road of God, which ascends. Take the more difficult road. Farewell. And don't feel afflicted at partings. Your duty is not to weep. It is to strike. Strike, and may you have a steady hand. That is your road. Both ways are the daughters of God. Do not forget that. But fire was born first, and love afterward. Let us begin, therefore, with fire. Forward, and good luck. The sun had already risen high. Caravans from the Arabian desert appeared, bringing new pilgrims with multicolored turbans on their shaven heads. Some had crescent-shaped talismans made from boar's teeth, which they wore suspended around their necks. Others had tiny bronze goddesses, all hips, and others necklaces made from the teeth of their enemies. There were wild beasts of the east who had come to be baptized. The Baptist saw them, uttered a piercing cry, and rushed down from the rock. The camels knelt on the mud of the Jordan, and the voice of the desert was heard to resound mercilessly. Repent, repent, the day of the Lord has come. Meanwhile, Jesus found his companions. They were sitting on the river bank, silent and afflicted, waiting for him. It was now 3 days and 3 nights that he had not appeared. 3 days and 3 nights that the Baptist had abandoned his baptizing to talk to him. He spoke on, and Jesus listened with bowed head. What was he saying? Bearing down over him like a vulture. And why was the one so wild and the other so sad? Judas paced up and down in a rage, puffing. As soon as night fell, he secretly approached the rock to hear. The two of them were talking, cheek to cheek. Judas cocked his ear, but could distinguish only a murmur, a rapid murmur, as from running water. One was giving, the other receiving, being filled, as though the Son of Mary were a jug propped up under a tap. The red beard slid down from the rock in a frenzy, and once more began to pace in the darkness. Shame on me, he grumbled, to let them deliberate about Israel while I am absent. The Baptist should have entrusted his secret to me, should have given me the axe. I am the only one who feels Israel's pains. I am able to use the axe. He, the clairvoyant, is not. He shamelessly proclaims that we are all brothers, injured and injurers, Israelites and Romans and Greeks, devil take them. He lay down at the foot of the rock, far from the other companions whom he did not wish to see. For a moment he fell asleep and seemed to hear the Baptist's voice and scattered disparate words. Fire, Sodom and Gomorrah, strike. He jumped up. Once awake, however, he heard nothing but the night's birds and the jackals and the murmur of the Jordan in the reeds. He went down to the river and plunged his flaming head into the water to extinguish the fire. He'll come down from the rock, won't he? He murmured. He will, and then I shall learn his secret whether he likes it or not. When he saw Jesus approach, therefore, he jumped up, as did the other companions. They ran out joyfully to receive him, touched his shoulders, his back, caressed him, and John's eyes filled with tears. A deep wrinkle was now engraved in the middle of the Master's forehead. Peter could not contain himself. Rabbi, he said, why did the Baptist talk to you for days and nights? What did he tell you to make you so sorrowful? Your face has changed. His days are few, answered Jesus. Stay with him, all of you, and be baptized. I am leaving. Where are you going, Rabbi? Cried out Zebedee's younger son, taking hold of Jesus' tunic. We'll all come with you. I am going by myself to the desert, where no company is needed. I'm going there to speak with God. With God? Said Peter, covering his face. But then you'll never return. I shall return, said Jesus with a sigh. I must return. The world is suspended by a single thread. God will give me instructions, and I shall return. When? How many days will you be absent again? Look how you're leaving us. They all shouted, holding on to him so that he would not go. But Judas stood apart, silent, and looked at them with scorn. Sheep, sheep, he grumbled. I thank the God of Israel that I am a wolf. I shall return when God wishes, brothers. Farewell. Stay here and wait for me. Until then, goodbye. The brothers stood petrified and watched him move slowly toward the desert. He did not walk now as before, when he hardly touched the ground, but heavily, thoughtfully. He picked a reed to lean upon, mounted the arched bridge, stopped at its middle, and looked down. On all sides he saw pilgrims immersed in the muddy current of the river, their sun-blackened faces shining happily. Opposite them, on the shore, others still beat their breasts and confess their sins to the air, watching with inflamed eyes for the Baptists to signal their turn to plunge into the holy water. Sunk hip deep in the Jordan, the wild ascetic baptized the people in whole flocks. Then angrily, without love, pushed them toward the shore, whence new flocks followed behind them. His pointed jet-black beard shone in the sun, as did his fuzzy hair, which had never been cut, and continued shouts came from his wide, massive, eternally opened mouth. Jesus swept his eyes over the river, the people, and in the distance the Dead Sea, the mountains of Arabia, the desert. He leaned over and saw his shadow undulating with the current toward the Dead Sea. How nice it would be, he thought, to sit at the edge of the river and watch the water flow towards the sea, with the trees, birds, clouds, and at night the stars all reflected in it and flowing too. How nice if I could roll along also and not be devoured by this care for the world. But he shook himself, banished the temptation, pulled himself away from the bridge, and, descending with quick steps, disappeared behind the bleak rocks. The Red-beard stood on the shore, keeping constant watch over him. He saw him disappear, and fearing that he might escape, rolled up his sleeves and followed behind, overtaking him just as he was about to enter the endless sea of sand. "Son of David, stop!" he called to him. "Why are you leaving me like this?" Jesus turned. "Judas, my brother," he said supplicatingly, "do not come farther. I must be alone." "I want to learn your secret," said Judas, advancing. "Don't be in a hurry. You will learn it when the time comes. But I'll tell you this much, Judas, my brother. Be happy. Everything is going well." "Everything is going well" is not enough for me. A wolf's hunger is not appeased with words. Maybe you don't know that, but I do. If you love me, be patient. Look at the trees. Are they in a hurry to ripen their fruit? "I'm not a tree, I'm a man," the Red-beard objected, coming closer. "I'm a man, and that means a thing which is in a hurry. I go by my own laws. The law of God is the same, whether for trees or men, Judas." The Red-beard ground his teeth. "And what is that law called?" he asked sarcastically. "Time." Judas stood still and clenched his fists. He did not accept this law. Its pace was excessively slow, whereas he had not a moment to lose. The depths of his being held to another law, his own, opposite to that of time. "God lives for many years," he shouted. "He is immortal. He can be patient, therefore, and wait. But I'm human, a thing, I tell you, that is in a hurry. I don't want to die before I see what I have now only in my mind. Not only see it, but touch it with my hands." "You shall see it," answered Jesus, waving his hand to calm him. "You shall see and touch it, Judas, my brother. Have faith. Goodbye. God is waiting for me in the desert." "I'll come along. The desert is not big enough for two. Go back." The Red-beard growled and bared his teeth like a sheepdog that hears his master's voice. Head bowed, he turned around and marched heavily over the bridge, talking to himself. He remembered when he roamed the mountains with Barabbas, God bless him, and the other rebels. What an atmosphere of ferocity and freedom! What a splendid leader of cutthroats was the God of Israel! That was the kind of leader he needed. Why did he follow this clairvoyant who was scared of blood and shouted, "Love, love," like a panting young girl? But let's be patient, Judas reflected, and see what he brings back from the desert. Jesus had now entered the desert. The more he advanced, the more he felt he had gone into a lion's cave. He shuddered, not from fear, but from a dark, inexplicable joy. He was happy. Why? He could not explain it. Suddenly he remembered a dream he had one night when he was still a child, hardly able to talk. It seemed thousands of years ago, the earliest dream he was able to recall. He had worked his way into a deep cave and found a lioness who had given birth and was suckling her cubs. When he saw her, he grew hungry and thirsty, lay down, and began to suckle with the lion cubs. Afterward, it seemed that they all went out to the meadow and began to play in the sun. But while they were frisking, Mary, his mother, appeared in his dream, saw him with the lions, and screamed. He awoke and turned angrily to his mother, who was sleeping at his side. "Why did you wake me up?" he shouted at her. "I was with my brothers and my mother." "Now I understand why I am happy," he reflected. "I am entering my mother's cave, the cave of the lioness of solitude." He heard the disquieting hiss of snakes and of the burning wind which blew between the rocks, and of the invisible spirits of the desert. Jesus bent over and spoke to his soul. "My soul, here you will show whether or not you are immortal." Hearing steps behind him, he cocked his ear. There was the crunching of sand. Someone was walking toward him, calmly, surely. "I forgot her," he thought, shuddering. "But she did not forget me. She is coming with me. My mother is coming with me." He knew very well that it was the curse, but he had been calling her mother to himself now for such a long time. He marched on, forcing his thoughts elsewhere. He recalled the wild dove. A savage bird seemed to be imprisoned within him. Or was it his soul rushing to escape? Perhaps it had escaped. Perhaps the wild dove which chirped and flew circles over him the whole time he was being baptized was his soul, not a bird or a seraph, but his own soul. This was the answer. He started out again, calm. He heard the footsteps behind him crunching the sand, but his heart was steady now. He could at last endure everything with dignity. Man's soul, he reflected, is all-powerful. It can take on whatever appearance it likes. At that instant it became a bird and flew over me. But as he marched tranquilly along, suddenly he cried out and stopped. The thought had come to him that perhaps the dove was an illusion. A buzzing in his ear, a whirling of the air, because he remembered how his body had gleamed, light and omnipotent, like a soul, how whatever he wanted to hear, he had heard, whatever he wanted to see, he had seen. He had built castles in the air. "Oh God! Oh God!" he murmured. "Now that we shall be alone, tell me the truth. Do not deceive me. I am weary of hearing voices in the air." He advanced, and the sun advanced with him. It had finally reached the top of the sky, directly above his head. His feet were burning in the fiery sand. He spied around him to find some shade, and as he did so, he heard wings flapping above him and saw a flock of crows rush into a pit where there was a stinking black object in the process of decay. Holding his nose, he approached. The crows had fallen upon the carcass, planted their claws in it, and began to eat. When they saw a man approach, they flew away, angrily, each with a mouthful of flesh in its talons. They circled in the air, calling to the intruder to go away. Jesus leaned over, saw the open belly, the black half-striped hide, the short knotted horns, the strings of amulets around the putrid neck. "The goat," he murmured with a shudder. "The sacred goat that bore the people's sins." He was chased from village to village, mountain to mountain, and finally to the desert, where he perished. He bent over, dug in the sand as deeply as he could with his hands, and covered the carcass. "My brother," he said, "you were innocent and pure, like every animal. But men, the cowards, made you bear their sins, and killed you. Rot in peace. Feel no malice against them. Men, poor weak creatures, have not the courage to pay for their sins themselves. They paste them upon one who is sinless. My brother, requite their sins. Farewell." He resumed his march, but stopped after a few moments, troubled. Waving his hand, he called, "Until we meet again." The crows began to pursue him maniacally. He had deprived them of the tasty carcass, and now they were following him, waiting for him to perish in his turn, and for his belly to split open so that he could eat. What right did he have to do them this injustice? Had not God designed crows to eat carcasses? He must pay.